Humans at war for the first time, we warned you. Escape while you can. General Luke Carter paced in the command room, his boots echoing softly against the cold metal floors. The hum of the machines around him seemed almost deafening in the silence. The air was thick with the tension that had been growing for weeks. The world had never known war on this scale before. They had never needed to fight for survival. Until now. Carter paused, looking out the wide windows that showed a clear view of the stars. The distant planets seemed peaceful, unaware of the storm that was about to come. He sighed, rubbing his forehead, his mind running through all the possibilities. He knew what was coming. He had known for a while, but no one had truly listened. "We warned them," he muttered under his breath. "We warned everyone." The warning had come weeks ago, a strange transmission intercepted by the communications satellites orbiting Earth. It wasn't much, just a cryptic message from the Orvans, an alien race that had never truly considered humanity worth their time. At first, the message was dismissed as a prank or a miscommunication. But then, the Orvans sent a second message. This time, there was no denying the truth. They were coming. Kara Mitchell, the communications officer who had received the first message, sat at her console, her fingers flying over the keys. She had spent hours trying to decode the strange signals, each one more urgent than the last. And now there was no more time to waste. Earth was in danger, and humanity's first war was about to begin. "We can't keep ignoring this, General," Kara said, her voice steady but strained. She turned to look at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. "The Orvans aren't just sending warnings, they're preparing to attack." Carter nodded, running a hand through his short-cropped hair. "I know, we've been preparing for this moment since we first received the message, but I didn't think it would happen like this. Not so soon." The team in the command room knew the stakes. The Earth's leaders had dismissed the threat as a misunderstanding, but now it was clear that the Orvans were not joking. They had come to claim Earth for their own, and they wouldn't stop until they had it. "Is there any way to communicate with them?" "To make them understand we're not a threat?" asked Captain Rachel Hall, the leader of the defense team. Her voice was calm, but Carter could hear the worry behind it. Kara shook her head. "I've tried. There's no response. They're not interested in talking. They want us to surrender or face annihilation. And if we refuse, we die." Carter turned to face the entire team, his eyes scanning the room. The gravity of the situation weighed on everyone. It was clear that this wasn't just an alien invasion. This was humanity's first real test, a test to see if they could survive in a galaxy full of dangers far beyond their understanding. "We're going to have to fight," Carter said, his voice low but firm. "We don't have a choice." The room fell silent. Everyone knew the truth. For the first time in history, humanity would be at war. And this time there would be no treaties, no diplomacy. There would be no avoiding the fight. Kara's fingers hovered over the controls, bringing up the most recent transmission. The alien language appeared on the screen, but it wasn't the words that mattered. It was the symbols. The Orvans had shown their true intentions. They were coming, and they wanted Earth to bow to them. "General," Kara said, her voice quivering just slightly. "They're here. We need to act now, or we'll lose everything." Carter's eyes narrowed as he looked at the screen. The image of the Orvan fleet was clear now, their ships massive and intimidating. The message was simple: surrender or face the consequences. But what did that even mean? What kind of consequences would they face? "We've fought each other on Earth for centuries," Carter thought, "but this is something different." He turned back to the team, his eyes hard with resolve. "We won't surrender, we'll fight no matter the cost." In the back of the room, Elena Foster, the lead engineer, stood silently, her arms crossed. She had been quiet up until now, but everyone knew she was thinking. Elena was one of the brightest minds on the team, and if anyone could come up with a way to survive this attack, it was her. "What's our plan?" she asked, her voice calm but demanding answers. "We need to be prepared. The Orvans have the advantage. They're stronger, faster, and they're not here to negotiate." Carter looked at her, then at the others. "We have to stop them before they reach Earth's atmosphere. We can't let them get close. If we can delay them long enough, we might have a chance to evacuate the civilians. We'll use the entire defense fleet. We'll hit them hard and fast." Rachel spoke up next. "But we don't know how many ships they have. They could outnumber us. We've never faced anything like this before." Carter nodded grimly. "I know. But we're not going to let fear dictate our actions. We've trained for this. We have the technology, the people, and the will to survive. We fight for Earth. We fight for the future of humanity." As he spoke, Kara pulled up a new set of coordinates. The Orvans were closing in. Time was running out. "They're getting closer," she said, her voice tense. "We have less than 12 hours to make a decision. After that, it's too late." Carter took a deep breath, the weight of leadership pressing down on him. "Prepare the fleet for launch. This is it. No more waiting, no more talking. It's time to fight." The command room hummed with activity as the team scrambled to prepare. The fleet was ready, but the unknowns were too many. The Orvans had far more advanced technology, and their ships were unlike anything humanity had ever seen. But Carter knew one thing for sure: Earth's defenders would not go down without a fight. The atmosphere in the command center grew thick with urgency. As the fleet began to mobilize, Carter's mind raced. There were so many unknowns. Would they even stand a chance? Were they ready for this? He didn't know, but there was no turning back now. Kara stood by the communications panel, glancing over the latest reports. "They're here. They've entered the outer rim of the solar system," she said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "They'll be in range in less than 2 hours." Carter nodded. "Good, we've got 2 hours to get ready, make it count." The rest of the team moved quickly, their minds focused on the task ahead. Rachel Hall joined Alina at the control panel, working with the engineers to prepare the defense systems. The rest of the fleet commanders were in constant communication, coordinating their efforts for a counterattack. Despite the odds, General Carter felt a spark of hope. It was small, but it was there. He was determined to lead humanity to victory, to show the Orvans that Earth would not bow to anyone. This was their home, their fight, and they were going to win, no matter the cost. The fleet was in motion. General Luke Carter stood on the bridge of the flagship, his eyes scanning the view screen. The stars outside looked the same as always, but there was a sense of urgency in the air. The Orvans were coming. They were fast, and they were relentless. Time was slipping away, and the fleet had only hours before they would be within the range of Earth's atmosphere. Inside the command center, Kara Mitchell worked tirelessly at her console, sending orders to the fleet and coordinating with the defense teams. Her hands moved quickly over the controls, but her mind was racing just as fast. She couldn't shake the feeling that the coming battle was more than just a fight for Earth. It was a fight for humanity's future in the galaxy. If they failed, humanity would be wiped out, lost to a war they hadn't even expected. "We need to start the evacuation process," Kara said, her voice filled with determination. "We can't risk losing the civilians. They need to be ready to leave Earth if things go wrong." General Carter nodded. "I agree, but we need to hold the Orvans back long enough for the evacuation ships to launch. We can't let them get through." The fleet was preparing for their first engagement. Ships lined up in tight formation, weapons systems online, shields activated. Each soldier, each pilot was ready. But there was a sense of doubt that no one spoke of. Would they be enough? Would their technology stand up to the Orvans' advanced weapons? They had no way of knowing, but they had no choice but to try. In the briefing room, Captain Rachel Hall was going over the mission details with her team. She had spent hours preparing, making sure every pilot knew their role, every ship was ready for action. The tension was palpable, and Rachel could see it in the eyes of her crew. They were nervous, but they were also ready. "We've trained for moments like this," she said to her crew, trying to calm the nerves. "This is what we've been preparing for. We're not just fighting for Earth. We're fighting for every person in the galaxy who's ever believed in peace. We fight for the future." The pilots nodded, but there was little to say. They all knew the risks. The Orvans had advanced ships, weapons that could destroy anything in their path. But Earth wasn't going down without a fight. They wouldn't let it. Back on the bridge, Carter watched as the countdown to the first battle began. His thoughts were a whirlwind. He had led many missions before, but this felt different. This wasn't just another battle. This was a war that could change the entire course of humanity's future. If they lost, Earth would fall, and so would every hope of peace with the galaxy's other races. But if they won, there was a chance. A slim chance, but a chance. "We're ready," Kara said, her voice breaking through his thoughts. She turned to him, her expression serious. "The Orvans will be here soon. It's time." Carter nodded, taking a deep breath. "All units prepare for engagement. This is it. We hold them off or we lose everything." The fleet began to move, heading toward the outer rim of Earth's atmosphere where the first battle would take place. Carter watched the viewscreen as the massive ships of the Orvans came into view. Their size alone was enough to make anyone nervous. Each ship was larger than any Earth vessel, with dark, imposing shapes and weapons that looked like they could tear apart anything in their path. "Brace yourselves," Carter ordered. "We engage on my command." As the Orvan ships moved closer, the tension in the fleet was almost unbearable. The pilots gripped their controls tightly, preparing for what was to come. Rachel Hall, now in command of her squadron, felt the weight of the situation. She had trained for this moment, but no amount of training could prepare anyone for the reality of war. She glanced at her co-pilot, a young man named Sam. His face was pale, but his hands were steady on the controls. "Stay focused," Rachel said, her voice calm but firm. "We can do this." The first shots were fired and the battle began. The Orvan ships were faster and more powerful, but humanity had one thing they didn't: determination. Earth's defense fleet fought with everything they had, dodging attacks and firing back with precision. The Orvans had superior firepower, but the humans had something more important: willpower. They weren't just fighting for survival, they were fighting for their home, their families, and their future. Carter watched the battle unfold from the bridge, his eyes never leaving the screen. Every decision, every move mattered. There was no room for mistakes. He couldn't afford to lose anyone. The stakes were too high. "How's the evacuation going?" he asked Kara, his voice steady but urgent. "We've begun," Kara replied, her eyes flicking over the data. "The first ships are leaving Earth, but the Orvans are getting closer. We need more time. Time. It was always the enemy." Carter clenched his fists, watching the battle rage on. Ships collided, explosions lighting up the void of space. Earth's fleet was holding its ground, but just barely. The Orvans were relentless, and their ships seemed to be everywhere, firing without mercy. On the ground, the evacuation was underway. Thousands of civilians were boarding the transport ships, hoping to escape the coming destruction. But not everyone could make it. The Orvans were too fast, too powerful. There were still people left on Earth who would have to stay behind. Elena Foster, the engineer, stood with her team in one of the hangars, watching as the last of the civilian ships lifted off. Her heart pounded in her chest. She had worked for years to ensure the safety of these ships, but now it all felt so fragile. She glanced at the main view of Earth, the once peaceful planet now in chaos. She couldn't help but feel a sense of guilt. "What if we don't win?" she thought. "What if we fail?" But there was no time to dwell on that. They had to keep moving. Earth wasn't going to save itself. Back in space, the battle continued. Earth ships were taking hits, their shields weakening with each attack. Rachel Hall's squadron was in the thick of it, weaving through explosions and gunfire, trying to protect the civilian ships as best as they could. But it wasn't enough. The Orvans had begun to breach their lines, their weapons tearing through Earth's defenses. Rachel's heart raced as she called out orders to her squadron. "Stay tight, don't break formation, we can do this." But it was hard to stay positive when they were outnumbered and outgunned. Sam's voice came over the intercom, shaky but determined. "We're not giving up. We're not losing today." The fight was becoming a blur. Earth's ships were holding on, but the Orvans were closing in. Each minute felt like an hour, and each hour felt like a lifetime. Carter watched from the bridge as the battle unfolded, his heart heavy with each passing moment. The fate of humanity rested in their hands. "Focus fire on the lead ship," Carter ordered. "We take down their command ship and the rest will follow." The order was relayed, and Earth's fleet launched everything they had at the largest of the Orvan ships. The explosions rocked the battlefield as the command ship finally fell, but it wasn't enough to stop the tide of war. The Orvans kept coming, their ships relentless and cold. Kara turned to Carter, her eyes wide. "We can't hold them off forever. The civilians need more time." "I know," Carter said, his voice filled with frustration. "We just need a little longer." As the battle raged on, the question that hung in the air was clear. Could Earth's defenders hold their ground long enough to secure the future of humanity? Or would this be the beginning of the end? The battle was reaching its breaking point. The Orvans had been relentless, their ships moving with precision, firing powerful lasers that cut through the vastness of space. General Luke Carter stood at the center of the command room, his gaze fixed on the view screen, where explosions and flashes of light painted a chaotic picture of the battlefield. His mind raced. Earth's fleet was holding on, but barely. The Orvans had overwhelming numbers and superior firepower, and it seemed like no matter how hard they fought, they couldn't push them back. Carter's heart sank as he saw several of the defense ships go down, their hulls burning bright before disappearing into the void. Every loss felt personal, every life lost another weight added to his shoulders. "We're running out of time," Kara Mitchell said, her voice tight with urgency. "The Orvans are getting closer to Earth. If we don't do something soon, they'll have a clear shot at the planet." Carter looked at her, his face drawn with exhaustion. "I know, but we can't back down now. We have to keep fighting." Outside the windows of the command room, Earth's atmosphere seemed so calm, so peaceful, as if nothing was wrong. But the reality was far different. The Orvans' fleet was closing in, and every minute they delayed their assault was a gift they could not afford. They needed to buy time for the remaining civilians to escape and for the rest of the fleet to regroup. "How's the evacuation going?" Carter asked, his voice steady, though his insides churned with worry. "We've lost contact with several of the evacuation ships," Kara replied. "Some of them got through, but others were hit by Orvan fire. We don't know how many are still on Earth." The thought of the civilians left behind weighed heavily on Carter's mind. They had given everything to get as many people off the planet as possible, but there was only so much they could do. There were still thousands left behind, and the Orvans wouldn't stop until they were all wiped out. He felt the pressure mounting. His people were counting on him. Earth was counting on him. On the battlefield, Captain Rachel Hall's squadron was engaged in fierce combat. The Orvans had taken the upper hand, and every move they made seemed to push the humans closer to the edge. The battle had turned into a desperate attempt to buy time. The squadron was doing everything they could to protect the civilian ships, but they couldn't hold the line forever. "We need to pull back," Rachel's voice crackled over the comms. "We've taken too much damage. The ships can't keep up." Rachel's co-pilot Sam had been quiet for most of the fight, but now his voice came through, strained and panicked. "Captain, the Orvans have found a weak point in our defenses. We can't stop them." Rachel's heart raced as she glanced at the status screen. Several of their ships were badly damaged, and some were already drifting, their systems failing. She gritted her teeth, her mind working as fast as it could. They couldn't back down, not now. "We can't retreat, not yet," she said firmly. "We have to hold on or Earth won't survive." "Captain, we're losing more ships every minute," Sam said, his voice filled with disbelief. "If we don't pull back, we won't have anything left to fight with." Rachel's mind raced as she considered the options. They were stuck. There was no retreating. There was no surrender. They had to push forward, even if it meant facing the Orvans head-on. "We're going to fight until the last ship goes down. Stay with me, Sam. We fight for Earth." The words were out of her mouth before she could even think, but it didn't matter. There was no other choice. Not anymore. Back on the bridge, Carter listened to the desperate words of his people. The pressure of the situation was taking its toll. His team had given everything they had, and yet the Orvans were still coming. He looked around at the faces in the room. They were all tired, worn, but still determined. They were still fighting. That was all that mattered. "Everyone stay focused," Carter said, his voice a little more strained than he wanted it to be. "We can still win this. We've lost ships, but we haven't lost the fight." Kara's eyes flicked over the data again, her face pale as she watched the Orvans approach. "General, if we don't come up with a new plan, they'll be at Earth's orbit within hours. We're outgunned. We need to take the fight to them." Carter looked at her, his mind already working through the possibilities. The Orvans had superior firepower, but they weren't invincible. There had to be a weakness, something they could exploit. They just needed to find it. "Get me all the data we have on their fleet," Carter ordered. "I want to know everything, weapon systems, weak points, anything we can use." Kara nodded and quickly pulled up the information on the screen. "We've been scanning their ships, but their systems are encrypted. We've got limited data, but we do know one thing. They're relying heavily on their command ship. If we take that out, we might be able to disable their fleet." Carter's eyes narrowed. "The command ship, that's our target. Get me a plan to take it down." Meanwhile, Rachel's squadron was still in the thick of the battle, the sound of laser fire filling the airwaves. Rachel gritted her teeth as she piloted her ship through the chaos. "Stay sharp, everyone. We can't let up now." The enemy ship seemed endless, coming at them from every direction. But Rachel wasn't going to let them take Earth. She wouldn't let her crew down. "We've got one chance to hit their command ship," she said, her voice calm despite the chaos. "I need every ship in formation. We go in together." Sam's voice came through, shaky but still resolute. "Captain, I don't know if we can break through their defenses. Their shields are too strong." We don't need to break them all at once, Rachel replied. We just need one shot. With that, she gave the order and the squadron moved in, coordinating their attacks as they approached the Orvan command ship. Rachel's heart pounded in her chest as she lined up the shot. This is it, she muttered to herself. We hit them now or we lose, she fired. The explosion lit up the darkness of space as the first wave of fire struck the command ship. For a moment, everything was still. Then the Orvans retaliated, sending a wave of fire back toward Rachel's squadron. Ships exploded in the blink of an eye, their pieces drifting off into the stars. The battle was far from over, but Rachel knew they had made an impact. We've got them, Rachel said through gritted teeth. Keep up the pressure. But even as they hit the Orvans hard, the enemy fleet didn't stop. The Orvans were relentless, and Rachel's squadron was starting to feel the strain. Ships were falling and the losses were mounting. Every explosion was a reminder of just how high the stakes were. Back in the command room, Carter watched the battle unfold. He could feel his heart racing, his thoughts spinning with every loss. But he also felt something else, hope. They had done damage. They had hurt the Orvans. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep going. Now we hit them with everything we've got, Carter said, his voice fierce with determination. We take down their command ship and we finish this fight, no matter what it takes. Kara nodded, her fingers flying over the controls. I'll coordinate the next strike, General. We'll hit them with everything we have. As the final pieces of the plan fell into place, Earth's defenders prepared for their next assault. They were battered, exhausted, but they weren't giving up. The fight for Earth wasn't over, and they weren't about to let the Orvans win. The battle for Earth had reached its most desperate moment. The Orvans had been relentless in their assault, their ships tearing through Earth's defenses with unyielding force. General Luke Carter stood in the command center, his eyes fixed on the view screen, watching as the flames of war spread across the galaxy. He knew that the stakes had never been higher, and the next few hours would determine the fate of Earth and humanity itself. We can't hold them off forever, Kara Mitchell said, her voice tight with exhaustion. Their command ship is heavily damaged, but they're still coming. They've adapted to our tactics. We need something more. Carter stood still for a moment, thinking deeply. He could feel the weight of every decision pressing on him. So many lives were at risk. He had led them this far, but could he really get them through to the other side? He didn't know the answer, but there was no turning back now. Earth was counting on him. We can't let up, he said firmly, his voice steady despite the uncertainty swirling in his mind. We're not giving up now. We've hit them hard, but we need to finish this. We find their weak point and we hit them again. We push forward. Kara nodded, her fingers flying over the control panel. I'll have the fleet ready for the next strike. We've got to hit their command ship again. If we can take that down, we might be able to cripple their entire fleet. Carter's thoughts were interrupted as the ship's communications system crackled. It was Captain Rachel Hall reporting from the front lines. General, we're taking heavy fire. We've lost more ships. Our shields are down to less than 30%. The Orvans are pushing harder than we expected. Carter's heart sank. They couldn't afford any more losses. He looked around the command room, seeing the same sense of worry on every face. They were all fighting for Earth's survival, and every minute mattered. Rachel, hold your position as long as you can. We're coming for you. Rachel's voice came through the intercom, filled with resolve despite the chaos around her. We'll hold, General. We'll fight until the last ship goes down. Carter clenched his fists. The humans were fighting with everything they had, but the Orvans were closing in. The pressure was mounting, and they had to act fast. Kara, get the fleet ready for a final push. This is it. We either win or we lose everything. With the command given, the fleet began to move into position, preparing for one last, all-out assault on the Orvans. Every ship was damaged in some way, some beyond repair. But they still had their weapons, and they still had their will to fight. That was all they needed. Back on the front lines, Rachel Hall's squadron was doing everything they could to hold back the Orvans. The sky above them was a war zone, filled with explosions, laser fire, and the distant, eerie sound of ships colliding. Rachel's heart was pounding as she navigated her ship through the chaos, dodging fire from the Orvans. They had lost so many ships already, and every moment felt like a battle for survival. Sam, get us in position, Rachel ordered, her voice steady despite the tension in her chest. Sam, her co-pilot, was quiet for a moment before responding. We're running out of time, Captain. The Orvans are circling in for another attack. We'll hold them off, Rachel said, more to herself than to Sam. "We can't let them reach Earth. We can't lose." Her hands gripped the controls tighter as she led the squadron into position. The Orvans were coming in fast, their ships closing in like a swarm of predators. Rachel had never faced anything like this before, but she couldn't afford to be afraid. Earth was counting on them. She had to hold the line. The first wave of Orvan ships came at them, their weapons firing without mercy. Rachel's squadron returned fire, lasers cutting through the void of space, but the Orvans were relentless. Each hit was a blow to their already weakened fleet, and it felt like they were losing ground with every passing second. "We can't keep this up," Sam said, his voice filled with desperation. "We need help. We need backup now." Rachel's heart sank. She knew they were on the edge. "We're not giving up," she said firmly. "We keep fighting. We fight for Earth, for everyone back home." The ships exchanged fire in a deadly dance, each side trying to outmaneuver the other. The Orvans seemed to be everywhere, their ships moving with terrifying speed and precision. But Rachel's squadron was determined to stand their ground. They fought with everything they had, unwilling to let Earth fall to the invaders. Back in the command room, Carter watched as the battle raged on. He could see the loss of ships, the flicker of explosions on the screen, but he also saw something else. He saw the humans' determination. They weren't giving up no matter the cost, and neither was he. "We're hitting their command ship again," Carter said, his voice filled with resolve. "This time we finish them, no more hesitation." Kara was already working on the plan. "I've got the coordinates for the strike. If we hit them in the right spot, we might be able to disable their fleet." Carter's eyes narrowed. "Do it, make sure we don't miss." With a deep breath, Kara sent the orders to the fleet. "All units prepare for final strike. Target the Orvan command ship. We go in hard." The fleet moved into position, their remaining ships forming up for the final assault. Rachel's squadron joined in, ready to deliver the blow that could end it all. Carter felt his heart racing. This was it, the moment they had been fighting for. The Orvans were on the brink of defeat, but they wouldn't go down easily. They never did. The ships fired their weapons, lasers cutting through the darkness as they moved in on the Orvan command ship. The Orvans retaliated with everything they had, but the humans were too determined to back down. Every shot, every move counted. Earth's future was on the line. Rachel's voice came through the comms once again. "We've hit them. We've done some damage to their shields, but we need more. Keep the pressure on." Carter watched as the battle continued, his mind racing with the possibility of victory. "Don't let up. We're almost there. This is our chance to win." As the attack continued, the Orvan fleet began to falter. Their ships started to break apart, their defenses weakening under the constant barrage of human firepower. The command ship, once untouchable, was beginning to show signs of vulnerability. The humans were making progress. They were pushing the Orvans back, and for the first time since the war began, it seemed like victory might be within reach. But the Orvans weren't finished yet. They were sending out their last wave of reinforcements, hoping to turn the tide in their favor. The humans were tired, their ships battered and damaged, but they weren't about to stop now. They had come too far and they weren't going to lose. "We've almost got them," Kara said, her voice filled with hope. "The command ship is almost down. We just need one more strike." Carter nodded. "Then we give them everything we've got. Let's finish this." The final attack came in a single, focused wave. The fleet moved as one, pouring all their remaining firepower into the Orvan command ship. Explosions rocked the ship as it shuddered under the force of the blasts. And then, with a final, deafening explosion, the command ship was destroyed. The Orvan's fleet fell into chaos as their command ship was lost. The remaining ships began to retreat, their once mighty force now scattered and broken. Earth had won. Carter allowed himself a moment of relief, but it was short-lived. The war was over, but the damage had been done. Thousands of lives had been lost, and Earth would never be the same. But for the first time in a long while, humanity had proved that they could survive. They had fought for their home, and they had won.